All right, hello everybody. My name is Lance, and today I'm going to talk about something very near and dear to me. I want to talk about pirate software. For anyone who's not familiar, pirate software is a Twitch streamer who got a lot of hate for a situation he found himself in World of Warcraft, of all things. Essentially, the gist is that he ran away while his teammates were dying, and this exposed him as a narcissist and everything like that. While I do agree that I think his behavior is certainly strange, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. And I think that the internet is very, very wrong about pirate software. Also known as Jason, also known as Thor. We call him Jason for the rest of this video. First, up on the docket, we're going to talk about counterexamples. And when I say we're going to talk about counterexamples, I'm going to link, a couple resources in the description. These guys from the Rest of Science, their YouTube, it'll be in the description. They made a video where they kind of have this logic problem where they have letters and numbers, and you're supposed to figure out how to flip the cards over, what cards you need to flip over, in order not to violate the rule, right? And what they've determined is that most people are very bad at solving it correctly. People tend to focus too much on finding examples that support the rule rather than trying to find examples that don't support the rule or that would invalidate the rule. And I think that's kind of what's happened is that, it's kind of like a mass delusion through confirmation bias. The confirmation bias is so overwhelmingly strong in this situation, from my perspective, that everyone really thinks that this man's a narcissist. And I think that there's many more examples of his behavior that indicate that he's not. So that's one thing that led him in hot water. And the second thing is stop killing games. And this is when the internet really started to hate him. Is stop killing games is a movement. Uh, I'm not going to get too much into the details here, though my opinion is a little bit more robust than I'll give in this video. But the gist of it is, it's a consumer advocacy campaign to prevent companies from ending the service of their games uh, instead of like shutting them down, right? They're like live service games, so you have to be connected to the internet. And, maybe they run for 5, 7, 10 years, but at the end of its lifespan, however long it may be, you'd be required to give those tools over to the community. You'd be required to keep it alive in some kind of state. And Jason's take on this was, well, I don't think this is a good idea because that could possibly make it very difficult for people to commit to providing an experience for the game in a way that they can actually provide. The example I think he gives is League of Legends, right? And how how would you preserve a game like that? How would you put in a playable state without support from the developers? And I think that that's not necessarily wrong in and of itself, but I definitely disagree with his viewpoint on that being the conclusion. My takeaway has kind of been that stop killing games would be ineffective for the opposite reason, which that I think it's much more likely that it actually won't be restrictive enough, that it probably won't be able to enforce meaningfully um, these restrictions on companies in order to actually change behavior. So what I mean by that is, let's say we take the letter of the law as it is, right? They have it on their website that the game needs to be in a playable state. That's the term, playable state, right? Well, that can be interpreted in a lot of ways, right? And he's taken this very literal interpretation of what playable means. But I think the playable can mean so many different things. Specifically, I think it can mean, you put up League of Legends and the only thing you can do is 1 versus 1 against a computer. Isn't that technically functional? It functions. You can play the game. You can buy all the items you could before. You can play all the champions you could before, right? But that wouldn't be the game anymore, right? How is that really playable? Well, according to the letter of the law, it would be. That's what I'm talking about. In his view, he would think, well, you'd have to enforce it more strictly than that for it to have any meaning, so strictly that it would actually be difficult for them to, or for people to make games. And I think that that's the problem this movement has, just but understanding that people are lazy and they don't want to do their jobs. It's just true, okay? If they can enforce something in a way that makes so they get to do less work, that's how they're going to interpret that rule. That's just how it works, right? I feel like that's how it always works, at least from what I've seen. If you disagree, maybe that just means your part of the world is better. Good for you. I hope the world is like that. Then moving on, I've noticed that there's like this trend where um, he has this very literal interpretation of things, and he tends to get like really fixated on like certain details. I think he's actually just autistic. Now, recently I've come to learn about the theory of monotropism, which explains autism in a way where, on one side of the spectrum, you have people who are known as monotropic. They can focus on a few things at once. They have a difficult time processing a lot of sensations at the same time, a lot of different noises, a lot of different sights, sounds. They get overstimulated, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, you have kind of people who are more polytropic, right? People who do well with a ton of sensory information. In fact, they need a lot of sensory information going on to be engaged. They like chaos, right? That's a little bit more like me, a little bit, right? So, um, one thing that I've kind of noticed from my fiance, who's diagnosed autistic, very brilliant woman, is that I think that it's possible to look at someone who's autistic and see ego where there isn't ego, to see narcissistic traits when it's actually just autistic traits. In fact, it's actually very commonly noted in the scientific literature that BPD is very often diagnosed when people identify much more strongly with being autistic. Now, I know you could think about this and think, well, yeah, it's because being autistic isn't seen as being bad, but being PBD is, right? Everyone's going to prefer to be diagnosed as autistic, right? I don't think that's true because the treatment for BPD is actually completely different than the treatment for autism, right? So if you actually had BPD and you want to improve your life, you don't want to be diagnosed autistic because you're not actually going to get much out of that except initial sympathy from people. But eventually they're going to realize that you're just BPD. It's not really going to help you in the long run. So, you kind of get this situation, especially with autistic women, but it happens to autistic men too, where they get diagnosed with BPD, maybe NPD, and that's just not really what's going on. So this tab is just kind of reminding me about to mention this, but the percentages for these conditions vary widely. Obviously, like you ask like how many autistic people are in the United States, and you could get a number from 1 to 10%. Okay, based on who you ask. Same with BPD, same with NPD. Right? I think when I looked it up, it was like 1% to like 7% for BPD, NPD, and then for autism, it was like 3% of U.S. adults. But I think that he just simply does things. Jason's a part of things that I don't really think narcissists are capable of. One of those things is building a community. Uh, he has a great community of people. I went in there and I was so shocked to see how good his Discord was. I'm not going to pull up in this video because I do everything live in one take. So I don't want to like expose anyone like by accident, like dox anyone by accident. But Um, wow, what a great community, And the reality is, narcissists don't build good communities. They build insufferable communities, and I think that it says a lot about him that anytime he's criticized, you don't really ever hear criticism about his fans. His fans are pretty well tempered. Other communities, like they get lambasted all the time, right? Look at Hassan's community, like an actual narcissist. Hassan's community goes after people all the time. And that's what a narcissist community looks like. That's how they build communities, right? So it's all about them. It's all around them. And that's just not what his Discord looks like. You can go in there. You can look for yourself. I think that is a huge counterexample to the idea that he is a narcissist. I just don't think it's possible. And lastly, I want to review kind of the incident that started it all, the Mana Gem incident. And I'm going to enlist the help of a World of Warcraft player because I am not a World of Warcraft player. And I'm going to mute. And I'm glad I remembered to do that because I'd be on speaker. You just hear it. It sounds awful. Fortunately, I remember what he said. So this is going to be in the description as well if you want to watch it. But he talks about how, the situation is the situation and the pull is bad, right? So my understanding of what this would mean is there's too many mobs. Like they've aggroed too much at a short period of time, right? So they've things are all kind of off the rails from the very get-go. Now, if things go off the rails from start to finish, that is always the leader's fault. Doesn't matter what the details are, right? But if literally things were off the rails the entire time, unless it's the person who was pulling, I suppose, just disobeyed the leader, didn't follow a command correctly, then this man is actually so stressed out. He's biting his arm. Jeez. Um, but yeah, it's always the leader's fault. The reason why, as a leader, you get the credit and the glory when things go right is because you're responsible for when things go wrong. That's what a good leader understands. So that's true no matter what it is, whether it's high management, whether you're a CEO at Amazon, whether you're the president, whether you are a Ray leader in WoW. That's just the case, right? So I see that the situation is messed up. I'm already like the leader messed up. That's not necessarily mean they're a bad leader. It just means they made a mistake. There's a lot of things he's pointing out here. He's pointing out that this Blizzard is not going to work on the boss. I don't know. I'm just going to trust him. Apparently, my understanding is that the boss here, this Garfangus, I guess that's his name, he would be immune to being hard frozen, but not necessarily immune to like a slow. Like that would be like I guess a light CC, and then like a freeze would be a hard CC. You're just stuck, right? So they're all running, but you kind of already can see that Jason is just gone, right? He's just running. And the other people are kind of trying to stick around and watch a little bit. But his screen is facing this way, right? Which I assume, as someone who's played other games, that means that this is where he wants to go, which is correct, right? So he's just trying to leave. And I would, if I was put in this position, not knowing how to play the game, I would want to just go to town or something, right? I'm a Diablo guy. I would be town portaling out of there, right? And I would just be sitting in town until I knew what was going on. So he actually, one thing that's very interesting to me is he actually takes note of how his behavior is strange, while simultaneously he's like very adamant that once the leader says to run, like there's a wipe, you just go, right? It's just everyone just running, right? There's no like meaningful commands you get after that once you made the call to run away. And that makes sense. And I'll elaborate on why that makes sense to me a little bit later. But he's going to talk about how like there's still like pirate software is like booking it out of there. And it's funny because again, right, Jason's taking this literal interpretation of what it means to run away. But I'm assuming that is often not interpreted to mean to like literally just run all the way back to town. That you can stay a little bit closer, monitor the situation, and see if there's opportunities to make a difference. And apparently there were. I'm going to assume, maybe it's wrong, that there were opportunities to make a difference. And this is where he's going down, talking about more of the etiquette, the culture of what you would do in this kind of situation. And he's talking about how like you can be like, maybe around one of these pillars, a little bit closer. Yeah, you see him, he's mousing over to that pillar over there. And he's saying, yeah, you can watch what's happening and not like be in danger of getting killed by the boss because the boss can't hit you, right? Especially if you were to apply. I think he said it's like a 40% slow. He wasn't sure, but yeah, I'm assuming if a boss is slow by 40%, they're probably not going to catch up with any player unless it's like a super fast boss, I guess. And then we have, yeah, so he's saying like, all right, this guy's dying, right? The situation was off the rails the whole time. And now Pirate is looking, but he's kind of just watching, right? Like what I see is that he's frozen because now he's not doing anything, right? The chat like really turns against him here, right? Most people see this and they're like really not happy with how he's played this. But I would argue that, assuming we're thinking about the theory of monotropism in mind, Jason has acted absolutely in line with what I would think someone who is monotropic would act. They fixated on what the leader said. It's known that when someone says run, you run, and he obediently, promptly obeyed that command. Right? Nobody can say he wasn't obedient here. He followed the commands. One thing of note is like, the etiquette is when the leader says to run, you run. At that point, you really can't expect your people to do anything meaningful. Okay, I would not expect necessarily that people are going to look for opportunities to, slow down the boss and, look at their mana gems. One criticism that he has really gotten over and over is that he has this mana gem in his inventory. I can't even see it. I don't even know if it's true, but I'm just going to assume it is, obviously. And totally makes sense. So you would have a mana gem that he forgets about instantly when the situation gets very chaotic. That makes total sense to me. Right, when situations get like that, from my personal experience, people who are autistic do not handle those situations well. And when they try to do things in the situations, like they try to find opportunities, they tend to be bad at it. It's really not a knock on autistic people. It's just legitimately asking how we can kind of build situations, build rules that accommodate them. Because I mean, listen, I'm marrying one, okay? I'm putting my money where my mouth is, 100%. And that's why that there's this rule of when the shot caller says to run, everyone just runs, right? Because you can't expect everybody to be able to like, run and look at the boss and, uh, look at your inventory, check for mana gems. But you got to remember, was he ever asked to check for ways to replenish his mana? He kept saying he was out of mana. Nobody asked. That might seem kind of strange, right? It's only strange to you because some people, a few people, would think to like ask that of their people. Like they would be so like not hyper focused, but like they would be so able to like focus on so many things at once that they actually do consider asking one of the guys, like, do you have a way to restore that mana? Can you check real quick? And my guess is if he heard that, he would have, and he would have used it. And if he was asked to cast Frostbolt instead of Blizzard, he would have done it. That's my guess. We don't know because that's not what happened. And I know that there's another controversy where I think he said something to the effect of um, if I could go back, I wouldn't do anything differently. And it's a shame because he was never asked a question that I think everyone's going to find kind of silly, but I think we'll start to realize that it's more relevant than maybe we all think at first. And that is like, would that mean with or without the knowledge you have now? Like, are we talking about like you being put in a situation similar to this? Would you act the same way? Because in that situation, I would expect him to say pretty emphatically, as he did, yes, I didn't do anything wrong. But I don't know if he understands that the common interpretation of that question would be like if you could go back with all the knowledge you have now, would you act differently? Um, which, that probably sounds silly to most people who would be watching this. And if you're a pirate software hater, that's probably how you would interpret that question. I don't think that is how Jason thinks about it. I think he thinks about it like, why would you even ask that question? That would be pointless because we never are in that situation. That's an unrealistic hypothetical. So I'm going to assume you mean like if I was put in a situation like that again, not that if I like could go back to this literal same moment and have my memories because we never get to do that, right? Um, but I just wish there were more questions like that asked. And, like people will make fun of him for talking about how his dad works at Blizzard, right? And I think you just got to look at the context of what's going on when he says stuff like this, right? Like, what is he actually saying? Like, is he saying, like, my dad works at Blizzard, therefore I have some kind of authority to speak on an issue that you do not have? I have never heard him speak this way. Um, Probably the single best example that I've seen that makes me think that he's autistic is that his own tweet where he tweeted, it was in a Moist Critical video. He was talking about how um what was the tweet? He was talking about how there was two videos and people are mad at him because he made two videos about stop killing games. And nobody else watched those videos, which is really sad because I think that if his haters actually watched his videos, they would actually not hate him. They would actually understand more what's going on and they would probably agree with me. And if you're an adamant Jason hater, pirate software hater, I definitely invite you to watch those videos on Stop Killing Games he has out because he's actually quite polite, right? I watched them and I assumed that every technical detail he got wrong. He was just wrong, right? But you're allowed to be wrong. You're allowed to be disagreeable. That's not why people have an issue, right? People have an issue because they see him as like being smug and being like really like um acting like he's getting one over on you, but he's really not. Like he's like I don't know, like a lolcow, right? I don't know exactly how to describe it. Um, but nobody was upset over the videos. No one. That's not what was linked, right? The guy in charge of Stop Killing Games, kind of leading the movement. I think his name is Ross. He didn't link. He didn't like clip anything in the video. Charlie, Moist Critical, did not show any part of the videos. They actually clipped a live stream of him talking about the situation in which he was much more inflammatory. But his videos were actually very moderate and relatively they were quite polite. So nobody would have really gotten that upset for those videos. I don't think Jason understands this. I think that he does actually think that people are upset about the videos. I don't know how many people see a huge distinction between the videos and his live stream on the subject. And my concern is, you know, is the internet holding somebody accountable who kind of like uses others, selfish, They're always right. They don't ever listen. Or are they just bullying an autistic man for sharing his special interests in video games with the world? And if I've introduced even 5% of a doubt in anyone's mind, you got to be real careful, because I think that that would be really bad if that's what we were all doing. Really bad. I think you better be damn sure that he is a narcissist before you say the things I've seen said about him. And I want to follow up before the video gets too long. And I want to say that from what I've seen, he seems like a very sweet man. Um, he has like a lot of donations to Obvious. He's like a whole ferret stream he does. He loves ferrets. Apparently, a very common autistic fixation, according to my fiance. Otherwise, I wouldn't know. And I think that, I see people, engage with this and they're so dismissive of these counter examples. It's like they just don't matter. And that's really scary to me, because I see that as like why the world is messed up, right? People see this as like this silly thing where some guy can't admit he's wrong about a mana gem or something. I see it as like, no, he just forgot about the mana gem and he's trying to communicate and he's just not very good at it. That's okay. He's a very brilliant man. He's good at a lot of other things. He doesn't have to be. And nobody, people just don't like it. People just don't like autistic traits. And regardless of whether he's autistic or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the slightest. Because I think the video is still a very good reminder for what can happen to autistic people and why autistic people have a hard time, even if he himself is not autistic, right? Because this is something that autistic people really do struggle with. This is, a lot of people think it's just about learning social cues. But this theory of monotropism really kind of enlightens us into the mind of an autistic person, which, because they have a hard time communicating, I think is often hard to understand for the rest of us. I mean, it's hard even for me to understand. So I understand, other people cannot understand how their minds work, right? But this, you know, fixating on the word run and just getting out of there, right? His screen is just running, right? He's just obeying what the leader said. And once he hears that, he's not going to be able to hear anything else, right? Forgetting he has a mana gem, right? He's not able to hear everybody talking over each other and be afraid of getting potentially one shot by a boss. I assume he doesn't have very much in the way of defenses. If there are tanks in this game, I mean, I'm a Diablo guy, so in hardcore Diablo, you would always have some kind of defense, no matter who you are. I don't know if it's the same in World of Warcraft. I legitimately don't. But I mean, how do you know if you're going to get one shot or not? It's not like you want to find out, right? You'd rather just get out of there if you feel like you can. And that's the issue. Some people see it as an excuse for him to prioritize himself and keep himself out of harm's way and to save a mana gem. But the damage he suffered is worth so much more than a mana gem. I really highly doubt that that was the motivator for all this, right? If it were me, I would have gone away with this so easily, right? It would be so easy. First, what you do is you apologize, regardless of what you if it's right or wrong, right? And then the next thing you do is you acknowledge how you could have played better, even maybe if it's not 100% correct. And then you like offer to help them level, right? This is hardcore, so I'm assuming these people are going to have to re-level their characters. And if you offer to like help them through that process, I don't even know what that kind of support would look like. But if you could meaningfully help them in any kind of way by, I don't know, if they have leveling gear. I think the term twink gear actually came from this game. So I'm assuming leveling gear exists, but even if you don't have much in the way of leveling gear, if you just pretend like you do and just offer it, well, that makes them look a lot better in this clip. And these are the kind of things you'd see from a manipulator, right? Someone who can manipulate. And these are all things that he's like Jason has stated on Dr. K's stream, notably, that he really doesn't want to do, right? He feels like that's really disingenuous, right? I've noticed that autistic people very often have self expression as a core value. My fiance does. I mean, maybe it's not always the case, but I tend to notice that people who are autistic tend to really enjoy expressing themselves, talking about their special interests, just letting them be themselves. And that's just not him, right? Which makes sense. If you're autistic, you really don't want to be going around here trying to manipulate people because you're really bad at it, right? Um, but if it was me, I'd get away with roaching here all the time. I'd fool all you. None of you guys would know I would do it, you know? And that's kind of the thing that's so silly to me. It's you're asking him to do something to prove that he's not a narcissist that is so easy to do, right? If it's so simple to do, aren't you just like selecting for smarter narcissists to like get away with it? Does that make sense? Like if you're making it easy to get to not be held accountable, like all you have to do is say sorry, you admit you're wrong, man. Like if you just like if you make it so that all they have to do is lie, you're just encouraging the dishonesty. I can do that so easily, right? Like it's so easy to do that. But I don't fault him for a second for it, right? I almost like I really do admire this, and it is an autistic trait, and I admire it as a trait because I think the world would be better if we functioned like that. I think the world would be a lot more honest, and I think it'd be a lot harder actually for bad people to get away with things. I don't think the criteria for letting someone slide on doing something wrong should be making them say that they're sorry. Anything that involves them just using their words, that can't be sufficient. What does that matter? Right? He doesn't understand why it matters because like is because it's not genuine or authentic. I don't understand why it matters because it's not effective. It's really funny and interesting how that kind of mirrors our perspectives on stop killing games, right? He doesn't think that the movement is good because it's going to push games to a level of authenticity that is not possible without official dev support. I think that it's way too easy to just fake an effort. Just pretend like you care about putting the game in a functional playable state and just get away with it. You guys wonder why there's so many people right now in the world, especially in the United States government, who are getting away with so much right now. Ask yourself why you think it's okay to let people get away with something just because they said they were sorry. You're part of the problem. You're part of the problem. Thank you guys. I hope someone gets food for thought from this video. I enjoyed making it more than I thought I would. And if anyone disagrees with me, feel free to let me know. I have a hard time engaging, responding to comments. So, I think a hate or otherwise, an influx is supporting me a lot to me. Thank you guys. See you in the next one.